All right, so this class is on the hip flexors. Iliacus and psoas are the two primary hip flexors. The big central head of quadratus also flexes the hip, but it also extends the knee. So if we're going to talk about specifically the hip flexors, it's iliacus and psoas, and they're right here. So obviously, those of us that are spending a lot of time in the day sitting, these muscles are resting in a shortened position. So they might get a lot of exercise, depending on what you're doing. But for the most of us, because we do tend to spend a lot of time with the hip flexed, that muscle gets used to relaxing and working a lot of times in a shortened position. This will create low back problems for some. This will create really tight hip mobility for some. This can cause knee problems at anywhere north or south of that link in the chain. So sometimes working on the hips will relieve knee pain. It'll relieve low back pain. It'll maybe even help loosen up your shoulders. It can be surprising where you feel the benefit of this practice. So even if you feel like my hips don't hurt, you should still open your hip flexors. So that being said, this is really good central work for 90% of us out there that spend a lot of time with shortened hip flexors. And we'll just stay sitting for a second just to properly establish our focus. Let the eyes float closed if they're willing to. If the eyes stay open, that's fine too. When you're not really worried about what you're looking at, as you ground the sit bones, lift straight up through the center of the skull. As you lengthen the center line from tailbone up through the back of the throat. This should also give you an opportunity to have more space to breathe into. The shoulders spread and drop. Consciously releasing tension or habitual grip around the face, the ears, the neck. The way we're carrying the body becomes longer and more integrated. Gently lifting through the back of the throat, creating that little narrowing in the passageway of the breath, keeping the breath slow and deliberate. And starting to gently lift the core, gently lift pelvic floor and up around the hips as you breathe more powerfully into the rib cage. So especially since we're going to heat up the hip flexors, some strong core work is called for, and definitely want to start gathering up the low belly, creating a more powerful breath that still refreshes you. But this is like starting the engine towards your core work. So from here, gently open the eyes. I'm going to bring you down onto the floor. And as we roll back, I'm just going to start with the knees and the chest. You can drop the head, gently rock from side to side. I'm still quietly lifting the muscles around the hips. Still guiding the breath into the rib cage. And just as a gentle warm up for the hip flexors, so this isn't tons of work, but it's just isolating the hip flexor proper. I'm going to hold my right knee and keep it in pretty close. I'm going to extend my left leg. So really sparky, toes shooting up towards the ceiling, straight if possible. If the hamstrings are tight, maybe the leg doesn't straighten, but you're fully engaged. And then keeping the spine on the floor, keeping my knee hugging, I'm just going to slowly lower down that long straight leg. You'll feel your belly engage, but you'll also feel that front of the hip pocket engage as you lift the leg back up. So I'm going to slowly lower it down, lower it down. This is not in time with my breath because I'm moving it super slow. If you have a nice, deep, slow respiration, you might inhale for a long time as you lower down the leg. You might exhale a long time as you take the leg up. But if your breaths are shorter, that's fine. I just want a really slow, well-aligned, curious leg raise. So this is less about the belly right now, specifically just working the hip socket, just working the hip flexors. So have a look at that long leg. Make sure that you're not externally rotated right now. So my kneecap is pointing exactly back at my face. I'm not rotated out. I can't see the back of my ankle. I'm well aligned with the top of my knee. And I'm trying to make sure that there's no shimmy or rotation in that action. So the leg is neutral. I'm specifically getting through the longest chain through the hip flexors as the quads synergize with that hip flexor. And you just want to spend a few reps here becoming really conscious and connected and gently utilizing that area before you put a ton of work into it. And we'll switch. I'm going to hug the left knee, bring it into the chest. Really, really sparky right leg. So really use those quads to stabilize and extend the knee. Sparky toe, loads of energy out through that leg as I lower it down and gather it back up, keeping the breath deep and slow. And if the breath is still faster than the movement of the leg, that's fine. I just want nice, slow, connected, curious movements in that leg. If the hamstring is tight, that's fine. It's a spark out through that leg. It's a static activation of the leg that's important. As you feel the muscles down the front of the thigh and up into the hip socket work. Good. And again, keeping it neutral, making sure that knee isn't swiveling or rotating. You don't want to be able to see the back of your ankle. Now we'll take up both legs. We'll introduce some challenge with the abdominals as well. So when the hip flexors and the abdominals are cooperating, that's a really powerful, well-balanced sort of core work. So I'm going to notice how I'm keeping my legs sparky. I'm going to bring the hands behind the head, elbows nice and wide. I'm just going to do a couple of crunches here. Now if the hamstrings are tight, go ahead and bend the knees because I really want the legs to be resting over my center of gravity. If it's hard to keep the legs straight if they're out here and you're already kind of struggling, I want this to be an easy place. So if you can't comfortably take the legs straight overhead, go ahead and bend the knees. I'm just warming up the abdominals. And I'm going to start to time it with the exhale crunch. Good. And this time I'm going to crunch up. I'm going to take my hands to prayer, fingers reaching towards the toes, and I'm going to take the hands outside the left knee. Yeah, so my whole upper body is twisted. So now I've involved the obliques to twist, the abdominals to crunch, and now if my hands are on the left-hand side, my right leg, just the right leg, is going to raise and drop. So now I'm kind of synergizing a lot more muscular activity in the core. So I'm using my hip flexors to flex and extend the right leg. I'm using my abdominals, rectus abdominis to keep the crunch, and I'm bringing my obliques into the action to create a twist. And yet I'm making sure I'm not holding my breath. You're going to do about 6 to 10. Really depends on your body. If you need to take a break, take a break. Take a count for yourself. Keep actively reaching through those fingers. Take the legs back up. Sparky fingers reaching up. Twist, so keep the crunch as you twist over to the right hand side. Stabilize here, and now the left leg lowers and drops. And I'm still looking for really slow, mindful quality of movement. I don't care how many leg raises you do here. Just make sure that you're multitasking the ab curl, the oblique twist, and the movement in that left leg as you breathe. Making sure you do the same amount on each side. I'm going to let you keep your own counts. Good. And come on back. So from here then, having spent some time heating up the hip flexors, I'm going to dig my heels, push the floor with the hands, and dig up into a bridge. And the reason why I'm specifically using my heels is because I want to activate the back of the leg. I want to activate my glutes and my hamstrings. I'm kind of digging forward like I'm trying to pull my heels towards my backside. And you can feel the hamstrings curl. You can feel the glutes light up. And this will release the muscle set that was just working. So quads and hip flexors releasing. And take a couple of breaths here. And release down. Good. So come on up to sitting. I'm going to take the legs fairly wide, just comfortably wide. And I'm just going to, if you find that sitting on the floor, again, if the hamstring posterior chain are tight and you're sitting a little bit curled up, feel free to sit up on a block or to roll up a towel and sit on something that'll kind of boost your sit bones up. So you want to be tall here. We'll go real gentle and then I'll show you how you can dial this up. So we're going to come back to heating up this area and then we'll stretch them out again. So alternating heat and release with these guys. I'm going to bring my hands just two spaces back so that I'm leaned back a little bit. I'm going to press down strong with my hands, boost up through the heart. And I'm still thinking about that engagement around the muscles of the hips. I'm going to turn my attention to my right leg. I'm going to point, so just like we have been, I'm going to point the toes, which engages everything along the chain. I'm going to make sure that my knee is neutral, so I'm not externally rotating, I'm nice and neutral. And then I'm going to see if I can pick that leg up. Might be challenging, even if you can't get the leg off the floor, the effort of trying to raise. The more often you do this, the more successful you'll be. Sometimes this big long head of the quads might cramp. At first, that's okay. You can give it a little hammer out with the fists if it complains. This is pretty targeted. Quads and hip flexors. Yeah. So you're going to do as many reps as you feel suits your body. And you're going to press, realign the spine, establish strong in the hands. I'm not chilling out here. I still have a lot of lift up through the core. I'm going to spark up the left leg and I'm going to raise for however many you're doing on each side. Think quality of movement. This is studying anatomy. This is not super high intensity. There's probably more burly ways that you work out. So this is just specifically learning about and isolating. Good. And again, if you gotta give them a little hammer out, grand. So we're gonna repeat that, or here's the option to progress. Here's the option to make it a little stronger. So I'm gonna make sure my sit bones are back. So you can even shuffle your seat back a little bit so that you're nice and tall. You feel anchored like you're sitting on a bicycle seat. I'm gonna point my toes. I'm gonna reach up, twist slightly, turn towards that straight leg, bring your hands to either side of the knee, and then I'm gonna push down and cat up. Now I'm really not trying to fold forward. This is very advanced. I can't do it folding this far forward. I'm gonna stay pretty reasonable back by my knee. If you do a lot of core work and leg raises, feel free to creep the hands forward. But I'm gonna press, I'm gonna cat up through the spine so I've got loads of zip. I'm gonna spark, and again, now I'm gonna try to raise the leg. And as I curl forward, this is gonna be more challenging. I'm going for about 5. You might do more or less. If you need to hammer out that little quad, hammer out that little quad. When I first started doing that, my quads would cramp, for sure. So I'm gonna reach up, square over that knee, melt down. land on the fingertips and push back. Really rear up through the spine. Think cobra, think spreading your cape. So I'm going to spread my shoulders up through the core, sparky toes, and I'm going to press. I'm doing about 5. Again, you might do more or less. Good. And give them a little shake out if they need. Good. And this time, also bringing some shoulder work into it. So having just worked these guys, 1, 2, 3 spaces back. I'll loop the shoulders, push the floor, boost up through the heart, bring the heels in fairly close, drive down. And I'm digging my heels. And go ahead and let the head relax back if that works for your neck. But as I dig my heels, I'm using the opposite muscles, which signals to the body that what is not working wants to release in order to allow this action. We're using reciprocal inhibition. And 3, 2, 1. Release down. Good. Now come on down. So to more specifically, we've heated these guys up nicely. So we're going to come back to this wide V shape. And I'm going to play with Warrior's Bridge. This comes from Budokan. This is one of Cameron Chain's moves. It's really lovely. So I'm here in this V shape. We heated up the right leg first, so now I'll stretch it out first. I'm going to bend and bring the heel in, not particularly close. So it's not right into my seat. It's kind of far away. And remember that heel dig. Now my straight leg, instead of pointing the toes, I'm going to flare the foot. I'm going to roll onto the pinky and I'm going to fall onto that side as well. So my hand is going to land. And as my pinky falls and I press down, I'm going to dig through that heel. And that heel dig, now I'm really starting to specifically open this hip flexor spot that all of us will tend to feel. One leg is straight, one leg is bent. And then come on back down. So we'll just say hi to this movement, first one of the day. And then switch, I'm going to straighten that leg. Gather up the left leg. So notice the legs are still at a wide angle. And notice I'm digging my heel. It's not particularly close to my body. There's plenty of space here. I'm going to high five my right foot. The pinky falls. My hand falls. I'm going to dig that heel as I come up and reach. And notice how I'm just looking down. I'm not trying to do anything too super fancy with the upper body because I haven't really warmed up the upper body that much. And then I'll ease down. Good. And just to contrast, I'm going to bring the feet together, bounce off the knees. Good. So we'll kind of make a series out of this. We're going to do boat pose, wild thing, butterfly. We'll just do a couple of those. This will be like our main set for targeting the hips and the hip flexors and the glutes because you can't address one without the other. Good. So we're just using butterfly or bound angle to kind of shake off any tension from the stronger movements. So boat pose real quick. I'm going to bring the feet together. I'm going to start just light on my fingertips. I'm not going to get comfortable back here because the hands aren't going to stay. I'm going to draw up through the heart. I'm going to sweep the hands forward while I keep that height. And then I'm going to scoop the feet up off the floor and just balance for a few seconds here. 3, 2, 1, release. I'm going to take the left leg straight. I'm going to bring my little V shape out wide. And as I fall, pointing out as well that as I dig my heel, I'm going to try to keep that knee in alignment. So a lot of us at first, if you're stepping on your right foot, that right knee might try to collapse in. Really squeeze that knee out. So this is quite an externally rotated moment, which will help open across the front of the hip, across the front of the groins. Right now my upper body is basically side planking. If you want to flip it over into more of a back bend, you're welcome to. That's kind of bonus work. Today we're just thinking about the hip. So you can do this only if it feels like a playful addition. And release down. And switch sides. I'm going to take my right leg straight. I'm going to bring my left leg in. Wide stance. I'm going to keep that knee swinging out over the toes. Don't let it collapse in. I'm going to fall away. Push down. Maybe you're just side planking. Take a moment here, dig your heel. Think about keeping that left knee out wide. Squeeze the backside, dig that heel. Then if you want to start playing with more back bend, spinning the heart towards the sky. Reaching your left arm overhead. And then oozing on down when you're ready. Bring the feet together. And balance, just using this as an opportunity to wiggle out. And roll the shoulders. And again, we'll play with that sequence. So squeeze the feet together. Fingertips light behind you, push down. Swing the hands forward. Setting here, making sure you're breathing strong through the ribs while you keep the lower core strong. Lean back as you sneak the feet up off the floor. If you want to straighten the legs, this will dial it up even more. If you want to take your arms up into the air, this is going to dial it up even more. Make sure you're not holding your breath. Shaking is fine. A little squirm is fine. Just make sure that you can still breathe. Spark out through the limbs. Or maybe you're here, or maybe you're here. It's all good. 3, 2, 1. Go wide with the legs. I'm going to bend the right knee. I'm going to focus on keeping that knee wide and tracking out as I fall into my left hand, left pinky, as I dig that heel and drive up. As I think about first lengthening and then maybe flipping into a back bend. Or not. See what works for your body. You can really do whatever you want with that flying hand. And sink back down. And switch sides. Pivot around. Keep that knee in line with the toes as much as possible. Use the outer hip a little bit to abduct. Side planking first. And then dialing it up through the heart as it suits. Really, don't get distracted from stretching the front of the left hip pocket. Release down. Feet together, bounce off the knees. And just to release through both the groins and for some of us the back of the hips as well. You can fold maybe a little bit. If the elbows land on the thighs, make sure that if you're seeking to further fold forward that your shoulders aren't climbing into your jaw. So it's a reach of the spine across the room. There's wiggle room. However far you fold is just natural to your body. And take one more breath. And slowly roll up. And then from here, last little movement. We could do so much. So the hip flexors are central to a lot of movements. But I'm going to come down. We'll start to slow down and really rest into a lovely lengthening of those hip flexors. So notice how my hands are nice and low along the rib cage, like I'm getting ready to pull into an upward dog. I'm going to draw the elbows in, shoulders down the back. Notice also that my feet are fairly wide. So this is wider than a usual upward dog. My toes can feel the edges of the mat. I'm going to press the toenails down, squeeze up through the thighs, squeeze up through the lower hips as I breathe and broaden across the chest. And I'm going to keep the legs active as I come up into an upward dog. So definitely not belly flopping. Even though I'm feeling a stretch through the abdominal core, I'm still lifting the low belly. I'm not just dropping the backside. My glutes are gently stabilizing up to the low back. I'm gripping and pulling and broadening the collarbones. The neck is nice and easy. Now this might already be enough of a conversation, opening the front of your hips. If you want to kind of gently play, if the spine is feeling good, I'm going to look over my left shoulder, and that'll kind of turn me and drop me into my right hip specifically. Take a couple of breaths here, because the psoas, which is one of those hip flexors, it climbs right up through the core, deep into the breath. It meets the diaphragm, which is the most central, deepest muscle of the breath. And come back to center, keeping some gentle activity in the lower body as I look over my right shoulder. And I kind of turn and drop into my left hip. Make sure your shoulders are not slouching into your ears and pushing. This requires a little attention span in the hands and the shoulders. But as I take deeper breaths, I'm massaging into the top end of the hip flexors. And come back. And gently twist, look over the left shoulder, looking back at the left foot, turning and sinking into the right hip. And come on back, up through the throat. Turn and look over right shoulder to the right foot, drop into the left hip. And then slowly ease down, ease down, ease down. So a lot of you out there, maybe it just feels delicious to stay and breathe. Some of you might feel a little echo in the small of your back. That is probably some shortness in the hip flexors, because the hip flexors tie on to the inside, excuse me, the inside of your low back. So now after doing that stretching, as we start to push our mobility and push a little bit of hip extension and spinal extension there, if it's kind of gently tight, that's fine. You don't want to ignore pain. Anything sharp and pokey is not good. But if there's just kind of a little, tight little echo, grumpy echo, it's up to you. But personally, I take that as an indication of tight hip flexors, and it's something that I want to address in my practice. It's just good to know if that gentle wide-legged upward dog is echoing in your back. You definitely have some tightness to release in your hip flexors. So you can continue to keep practicing and use that sequence. But we'll start to head towards stillness in this video. Not that you have to head towards stillness in real life. And drop the forehead. Taking a belly down stillness as we eventually get all the wiggles out. As you lengthen across the floor, let the breath move more freely down into the hips. And just stay.